theme of lost connections, light and darkness. And welcome to this, the fourth session within the festival on migration, exile and place. My name's Sarah Acton. I'm a landscape poet. I'm part of the Stadnicka workshop group, and I'm also part of the festival group. And really, I'm testament to the generosity and inclusivity, the fact that this is my first Tears in the Fence festival this year, and I'm able to speak to you here today. So I'd like to say a huge thank you to David Caddy and to the festival group for all of their hard work to bring together such a fantastic and dynamic festival. It's been amazing so far. For any of you that have been here since Thursday evening, you'll be aware that many of the talks overlap. We've already talked about some of the things that will come up in today's theme of migration, exile and place. We've talked about belonging, identity, accessibility, mobility, family, family ties, belonging, all of these things that no doubt we'll be talking about today. We've got some very wonderful poets with us for readings today. I'll be welcoming shortly Marini. Hi Hari. We'll be welcoming Maria Stadnicka, Lisa Kiew and Rethabile Masilo. First of all, I'd like to just share with you something that's struck me about tears in the fence, the very visual image of tears in the fence. We're going to be talking today about borders, about a border being a line marking territory. And of course, a fence is a border. It has one side and another. You're either outside or inside of a fence. It often needs permission to cross or a great deal of effort to scale. And Tears in the Fence, the magazine, the festival, and the visual image itself is a point of entry where poetry, language, myth, story, voice can pass, ideas can pass and be exchanged. And really that's the essence of the festival, the magazine, and this talk today. An exchange of ideas, a conversation that's been unfolding since Thursday night and will continue today. And I'm very excited to see what we talk about. First of all, I'd like to introduce my co-host today, Joanna, who's going to give us a little bit of housekeeping. Hi, Joanna.
Hello. I think many of you have been in the sessions where I've already explained this, but for anyone who hasn't heard before, just in terms of housekeeping, you will all be muted during the readings, and that's just to minimize the background noise to make sure we can hear all the readers clearly. One thing that I have neglected to mention in last night's session, sorry about that, we are recording just the readings portions of the event and the conversation, but during the Q&A and things, we'll turn the recording off so you can feel free to have a bit more of a free-flowing conversation. So if anyone has any technical issues, if you need me to help you figure out why your mic isn't working, send me a message in the chat and I'll see what I can do. That should be everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. And we'd also really like to encourage you to use the chat box to support our readers. Are we turning off, Joanna? Are we turning everyone off mute so that they can clap after each of the readings?
Yeah, you should all have the power to be able to unmute yourselves. So after each reading, if you'd like to unmute yourselves and clap out loud, then please do so.
And for our readers, just to know, there is a slight delay, but it's as close as we can get to offering that thanks and clap. The format for today is much as the other talks in 3 parts. We'll ask the poets to introduce themselves and have a chat with them on the theme of migration, exile and place. And then there'll be readings, 15-minute readings from each of our 4 poets, and then the Q&A session after that. We will have a short comfort break between the two of the 4 readings. So without further ado, I'd like to say hello to our first poet, Marini. Hello, Hari.
Hello, Sarah. Thank you for this lovely introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you all. I have to say a big thank you to David and to all the organizing committee. It's my first time in the festival, and I have learned a lot, and I have enjoyed thoroughly all the poets the last couple of days. I'm feeling like there are very, very strong voices and very strong ideas that I need to absorb and, take in. And I'm very happy to be here and share some of my words, some of my poetic journey. In relation to the theme of our session, as probably you can understand from my pronunciation, I am, from my accent, I'm Greek. Although I have been living in the UK for the last 16 years. So I always, I had at the last kind of 16 years, I had this issue of where is home, what exactly is home for me, for what homes mean in general for people. Is it the objects? Is it about the people? Is it about the experiences? So everything that I try to write, I guess, is coming from my own personal kind of experiences, and trying to find something that that is connected to my my feelings and my deep kind of experiences at that place, or at the place that I am. So some of the poems that have been written have been were inspired by places in Greece, and some of them are, things that coming from my experiences in living in London or visiting places in the UK countryside. So I love your idea, what you suggested about the porosity of the fence. And I'm very, very interested in this idea of how you can exchange, ideas and kind of stretch a little bit your consciousness and your awareness of what is happening around you. That there has been a horrible crisis, especially in Greece, with the refugees. In the last 5-6 years, we had refugees even before that, but since 2017, there were even more people, trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea and come to Italy, come to Greece. So we have been, and because I created a performance based on some of the experiences that I had with them and some of the conversations that I had with them, I can say that this was so strong that I didn't know what to do with the material. I didn't know how to actually approach that. What I'm trying to say is that we have many, many things in common, and I'm very interested in how we can actually find creative ways, to communicate and do something through poetry, through performance, through other means, writing, discussing, and all this stuff. I'm sorry for this long, this long introduction. Just to give you a few ideas where I'm standing at the moment.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hari. And I think some of the what is home, again, that's something I think that we even touched on in the first talk on Thursday, Sasha Acton mentioned. So I'm sure some of the other readers will be working into that. And also what to do with the material. I mean, that's a really interesting, having almost the burden of responsibility of how to communicate in the best way and across many languages, across many borders, in a way that offers exchange and opens up an unfolding conversation. Thank you so much, Hari. Lisa, hello. Would you like
Hi.
to introduce yourself?
Good morning. I write as LQ and I identify as Chinese Malaysian. I'm currently living in London, but I was living in Scotland before I moved to London. So I've been really aware in the last few years, and with the SNP coming into power in Scotland, and with Brexit in the UK, really so aware of the boundaries that are being set, the fences that are going up, the borders that are being discussed, and a lot of the conversation about who can belong, and who are we allowing to belong, and who is the we actually in all of the discourse. I'm from a family of migrants, a diaspora family. My family came from southern China, but is now currently spread all the way through the world. And we've moved in every generation, and I can't imagine that will change. And so it feels really challenging in this time when that movement, that free movement, is beginning to cease to be allowed. So it's a really kind of interesting time. So I write a lot about that. I'm exploring quite a lot about what belongs and what we allow to belong, what we allow to move from place to place. And I also move between languages. I'm multilingual, but I actually write through and across my two languages, my home Chinese dialect and also English, which is obviously living here is the language that I use day to day. I'm really looking forward to this session and the other poets.
Thank you so much. And again, what belongs and movement, obviously information can move so freely. We're in an era of information, but in terms of what we permit or allow to belong, and this sense of authenticity and the plurality of perspective as well, opening up authenticity and sense of place. Thank you. Next, hello, Rethabile, Masilo.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here. Thanks to David and to all the organizers for the invitation. I have appeared in Tears in Defense before, and my fingers are crossed that I will appear again in the future. My name is Rethabile, which I need to say something about. I come from Lesotho, which is in Southern Africa, and within my culture, whether in Lesotho itself or in South Africa, names are given according to the event or how the parents were feeling at the time of the birth. My name means we are happy. It's a complete sentence. This is important because, for example, my younger sister's name is Freedom. She was born when we got our freedom, our independence. I left my country in 1981 at the end of September of that year because there had been an attack on my family. My father was first a journalist and then a politician, and he just couldn't keep his mouth shut. And so we were attacked in order to get rid of him. And in this attack, which happened toward dawn, we lost a nephew, my nephew who was 3 years old. I'm convinced that it was a mistake, that a stray bullet got to him. My father was able to get out of the house that very morning and cross the frontier into South Africa, Lesotho being completely surrounded by that other country, the Republic of South Africa. Before this happened, 2 or 3 years before, we had already lost, I had already lost a brother who was 17 when he was killed by the same apparatus, the government. I'm telling you all this because most of my poetry really comes from the political experience that my family went through, the fact that we had to leave Lesotho in quite a hurry and get into South Africa at the time when there was apartheid in that country, and be bundled off to jail because we didn't have the proper documents as Black people in South Africa in 1981. And then having to leave from South Africa, find the means of living, end up in Kenya, and personally move on to the United States so I could continue my studies. I live in France today because in the United States I met a lady who became my wife, and she was French. I've always found it strange that I moved from South Africa, where there was state-sponsored racism, and then moved on to the United States, where there was racism, but not state-sponsored, and then moved on to France, where there was very little racism, not state-sponsored, but you found it in little pockets. For example, in employment, when they look at the CV, and your name is Rethabile Masilo, it's already a negative point for you. I write poems then based on all these things. I don't know, perhaps I started writing poetry as a form of therapy when I was in the States, and the wounds were still fresh. And then I just continued on from there. And during the reading, I will try to read the poems that illustrate what I have just spoken about. There are poems that I write about love, of course, about trees and so on. But with the theme that we have been given, I think I have chosen the poems that best illustrate what the theme is about and my own experience is. And that's about it, I suppose.
Thank you so much, Rethabile. We're really looking forward to your reading. And finally, but not finally, I'd like to say hello to Maria. Hi, Maria. Oh, you're just on mute there.
Unmute, yeah. You can hear me
Wonderful.
now.
Yes, we can.
Right,
Thank you.
thank you. Such a joy to be here this morning. And if you don't know me, my name is Maria Stadnicka. I'm a writer and a journalist. I live in Gloucestershire in Midlands. And I've been writing since the age of 6. But I've recently published 3 poetry books in English. I mean, recently, having been here since 2013. And I reflected over the past week, over the past few months, reflected on the idea of migration as well as why I'm writing, specifically now, considering the pandemic, considering the economic turmoil that we're all experiencing. And this brought back an article that was actually written by a migrant, a Russian migrant to America. His name was Joseph Brodsky, and he published in 1972 this article in New York Times, a 5,000 words article in which he condemned the political climate in Europe at the time and worldwide, evaluating his dangerous principles and hunger for domination and destruction. If you remember, around those times, the Cold War was at its peak. Now, Brodsky expressed his skepticism about all the political movement which he described as a structured form method used to avoid personal responsibility. And he particularly accused then the writing community of being polarized and unable to form itself and create a movement that leads to change. Now, Brodsky defended his belief in a different system, which was based not just on general movements, but I think based on personal movements of the soul. And he said that when a man looks at himself, it's so ashamed that he tries to make some kind of change. And that is what should be actually a personal movement. The article, which was translated for the New York Times by Karl Popper, was very tangled. It seemed very aimless and wasn't relevant to readers at the time. I mean, who sits now to read a 5,000 words article in a newspaper? However, though, Seamus Heaney picked up on that article, saying that in his vision, that was a moment of literary vertical takeoff. He said that is a moment crucial in establishing the capacity of language to go further and to express where the limitations of our language are and where the preoccupations with the self as a writer should be improved. I think it was a warning signal that politics at that time was a psychological danger for humanity. Well, there we go. From 1972, we are in 2020. Very little changed. The problem is then, from Brodsky's point of view. People engaged in external fights with the evil, then he began to identify themselves with the good. And when mankind begins to consider itself bearer of good, I think, it slides into self-congratulation. And this is a state of complacency. Brodsky, which was stateless in 1972, saw this as the source that is radically bad about people, and in particular about writers. I mean, Brodsky considered carefully the role of a united writing community. And I'm going back to the conversations we had last night about polarity. A writing community is vital in opposing official points of view, and should support personal movements by engaging with our society in real exercises of reflection, I suppose, and learning. But this engagement is built on access to books. Let's not forget that. Not articles about books, direct contact with ideas, not pre-packed blurbs. I mean, the latest PN Review editorial comments on the fact that we're experiencing now the closure of 800 British libraries. This happened in the past 10 years. I mean, the Trump era now is leading to not just the way we conduct politics, but the way we actually access literature. The triumph of the tweet reduces our engagement with books with a suite of emojis in which the responsibility for personal engagement with ideas is a constant forward retweet, a sum of likes. I mean, I put a poem online, and then if I get likes, might mean that people read, but do they actually read? I mean, give me someone that reads War and Peace now, or give me someone that writes a 5,000. And also, if you read a 5-word article in New York Times, I mean, I'll be your friend and your follower. This is where I come from in terms of migration, in terms of moving, and in terms of the role we have and the role writing and literature have in promoting change.
Well, thank you, Maria. I'm just trying to take all of that in. You've brought up so many pertinent points, both to the central theme of the festival, and obviously the unfolding of the conversation since Thursday, and today specifically on migration, exile, and place. I'm just going to pick out specifically the access to literature. We were talking about reading, obviously, and depolarization last night. Direct contact, and not at 3 times removed, obviously. And also we can bring into that conversations about language, and the choice of language for different poems wherever they're working from. I would also like to just highlight the role of the united writing community that you mentioned. That's why we're here, to come together in community at the festival, to open up discourse, to exchange as many ideas as possible, and excitement, and ways of going back out into the world after the festival to work and support each other as writers, and also to challenge and possibly make change, systematic change to things like access to literature. And the library's closing at a time when we're not so mobile. We're talking about movement and mobility today, and we're all sitting in our own homes, and we probably haven't been able to move around as much as usual this year. But to not have access to the libraries closes our possibility if we're not coming together in community like this to talk to each other. Thank you so much there. Gosh. So sense of place within that. I wonder if any of our poets would like to just talk a little into sense of place and home language, home. I'm just going to throw that open.
I wanted to kind of just pick up on that, the point about home language. I've been thinking a lot about the tongues that I speak and senses of purity. And I'm very much thinking about, there's a Gaelic poet I know, Peter Mackay, who, if you don't know him, I would really recommend his work. He talks about the challenge of being exiled from your language and then feeling that the home language that you spoke, your tongue is no longer clean in it. And for me, that's very resonant. And then there is also a sense of when you move across into another language, the speakers of that language that may be more culturally privileged read you as a dirty speaker. And I find that quite a lot in my own writing and in the journey that I've been kind of thinking about. And I think that affects how you can be located, both within literary traditions, but also within physical places.
Thank you. Anyone else from our poet guests? Or you're on mute, Rethabile.
Think I'm now all right?
Yes, you're great. Thank you.
Okay. I was about to say that I think home is a difficult and elusive concept for people who have had to have several different kinds of home. When I left my country, I did not particularly feel that I was at home at the time when I was at home. And even a few months after exile, I still didn't feel that I had left home. It was just after a few years in the United States and then in Europe that I pined for my country in all its aspects. I pined for my mother tongue, which is Sesotho. I pined for the smells of grasses, everything that you can imagine when you are not where you're supposed to be. And so the thing is that every time when I go back, with respect to the language, because Lesotho has two official languages, English and Sesotho. But unfortunately for us, more and more people are speaking English and less Sesotho. And so when I go back, I do everything I can to speak Sesotho. And I'm often told that sometimes it comes off as artificial, that I don't do it or say some things correctly with the right gestures and so on. But it's a language that I did not speak for 10 years. And then after 10 years of exile, I started speaking it by telephone. And unfortunately for me, because of all these things, I'm unable to write in it. I couldn't string 10 sentences together in my mother tongue, even though I can speak it. It's quite a complicated language that uses a lot of click sounds, which I can master. But concepts just don't come together when I write in Sesotho. And so my intention, in fact, is to somehow find a way to go back home physically and live there and try to write in Sesotho.
Thank you. Ari and Marini, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite powerful what we have just heard about not being able to actually write in your mother tongue. I kind of agree with Rethabile that you know, home is a kind of elusive term, and I'm always thinking that, you know, place or home or whatever is constructed, is created by stories. So stories that I am engaged with. So what is not about it's not about where I'm coming from, where I was born, where I'm living, but is how my attachment to these places or my engagement to these stories, how they are alive, how they shape me. So I guess the, you know, a place becomes quite strong for me when it starts creating something in my imagination or in my feelings, or creates helps me, you know, to experience something deeper, something that goes in a deeper level. And I try to enjoy both languages, Greek and English, and sometimes I try to find, because it's a completely different way of constructing the sentences and of approaching ideas and concepts, and how these languages, you know, they try to construct the concepts or the sentences themselves. So I'm trying to try at least to take things from each one of those languages that help me to access something different, if it makes sense. So I find, you know, that whatever I cannot really say in Greek in few words, I can say it in English, actually in just in 2 words. And in Greek, I need like 10 more words to describe how I feel or what I see. So I try to work with both of them and try to see what works best for me at that specific moment. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hear the poetry that the other people have there to share with us.
Thank you. And Maria,
I wanted just to add that I so empathize with all points of view that we've expressed so far, and with the fact that sometimes language can feel home, as language is could be something that inhabits us, and we connect with it, we connect with its values, we connect with our ancestry and our past as well. I'm currently studying, I'm doing a PhD, I'm interested in exploring different types of orphanhood. I got to the fact of realizing that it could be that we feel in a way orphaned and out of place when our parents are told that they do not exist or they do not matter in society. There's something that doesn't come from me. Yulia Kristeva said it first. She said, if your parents are told they don't exist, you start to think of yourself as an orphan. And I look at what happens at the moment and how insignificant we are, and how unable we are to participate in, for instance, the democratic exercise, more or less, and how out of place we start to feel. But then there is, on another hand, the epigenetics, and there is actually an East European philosopher, Lucien Blaga, who was talking about the minor and major culture, and the fact that actually we inhabit genetically, we inherit genetically a cultural matrix. So home in forms of language, songs, colors, landscape follows us from the moment of birth. Therefore, we feel out of place when something happens and we disconnect from it, and we create a barrier between who we truly are and who we want to be, or who we portray to be, you know, socially. It is a very difficult question because yes, you can be a migrant and still feel at home, but you can belong and still feel that you don't belong, and you can still feel exiled, because there are so many forms of exile. Someone said earlier in the chat, mentioned forms of electronic poverty. I mean, yes, that is a way in this current age of feeling out of place. Digital poverty, yes, an issue that can create a sense of being out of place, out of home. Sorry, it's so early in the morning, I'm just blabbing. I don't know what I'm saying.
It's fantastic. There are so many layers to these questions. There's so much to say on this subject. And you've mentioned orphaned, being out of place, and home being language, song, story, landscape, things that you're born with, and the disconnect from that. And really my next question, which I think Rethabile has almost answered in the chat box. There's a lot going on in the chat box, as well as the other conversation that's happening here. And my next question was going to be, does being in exile from the place of birth, from home, impact your view of that place? Rethabile, you've mentioned in the chat box about being in exile. I wonder if you could just say a little bit more about that perspective from being in exile.
Yes, I think that being forced to leave a place of birth, for me, it was a relief because of the circumstances that made me leave. I was relieved for two reasons: because of the violence that we were leaving behind, but also because as we were growing up, other places seemed more desirable. America seemed more desirable through its films and products and Coca-Cola and you know. And so I think we were all happy to leave, despite the sadness that we had just gone through. But after a while, it gets to you. It got to me. The music, like I said, the smells of trees and the food. So much that I remember when I was in the United States, I started wearing quote unquote traditional clothes, and I was really out of place. But I didn't care. I just wanted to belong to where I was supposed to belong to. It took me a week, and then I changed back and wore American t-shirts, of course. But there was a moment when I felt that I needed to say who I was, not hide where I came from. So today, fortunately, I'm able to go back almost once a year to Lesotho and take my family with me and see my mother, for whom I've written a lot of poems. I'll try to read at least 2 today. My father is late, so I've written a lot of poems for him too. I'll try to read 2 of them. So a strong sense of family for the people who are still alive and for the people that we have lost. So that there is a kind of a boomerang effect, perhaps, because at the beginning you want to leave, and then midway through it all, you want to go back. And that's where I am right now. I want to go back.
And of course, thank you. And you were quite young, weren't you, when you did leave? And of course,
I was 20 years old, yes.
Yeah, thank you. And just a question to perhaps pick up after the readings of you just mentioned, Rethabile, about being in America and deciding to make a statement about who you are. And I wonder how what you all write now in this moment has now also been sharpened by recent events, and not just the lockdown and the global pandemic, but everything else that has come out of that. We've had a few comments over the past few readings of writers who've said it's sharpened the focus. Maria, you said earlier, I've been thinking about why I am writing and what I am writing now. And perhaps we'll just hold that question with us and perhaps take it into the questions and answers afterwards. But thank you all so much for that amazing conversation. There's more going on as well. We're going to pause the conversation. I know everybody is really keen to hear the readings of our poets, so we're going to go straight into the readings. If you have any questions during the readings, please continue to engage through the chat box, and I'll try and keep an eye on that, and we'll pick that up after the readings. So Hari, you're going to be our first reader, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I'm going to show a little video that is based on some of my poems, some of the poems that I have written, and they were all part of this little collection, which is called 28 Paths of Hair. So I'll show you first this kind of video. It's about 6 minutes. And it has mainly 2 poems, but you can hear some of words from other poems as well. I mean, the full video is 12 minutes, but I'm going to show you just 6 minutes. And then after that, I hope we will have a bit of time, so I'm going to read some more poems. And this is a collection that I have tried to, and the review of this this collection written by Barbara Brizet was published in Test in Defense, I think in issue 70, if I'm not wrong. And tried in this book to say something about different experiences that I had moving through the different environments, urban environments in both cities, Athens and London. So it's kind of a whole journey, these 28 paths. So if Joanna can help me with with the video, so we can watch it all together.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
She said, I will stay. She's bleeding. Θα τα αφήσω όλα και θα τρέξω. 1, 2, 3. She doesn't forget. 11, 12. Μετράει. Counting. And then she said, path 15. The time slipped out of her hand and fell in a spiral motion down to the bottom, bouncing off the sides of the glass. And it was dispersed with a deafening silence, like an effervescent tablet dissolving in water. Και ύστερα είπε, μ' αρέσει το τραγούδι. She's bleeding. She doesn't forget to bleed. Διαδρομή 15. Path 15. Γλίστρισε ο χρόνος από το χέρι της. Έπεσε and fell, διαγράφοντας φυροειδή πορεία στο πάτο, τυπώντας τα γυάλινα τυχώματα του φωτογιού και διαλύθηκε με μια εκοφαντική σιωπή, σαν το παυσίπονο στο νερό. And then she said, I will run. Αντανακλάται στο σώμα της. Red light of the screen. 11, north too. She wants to go for a wander without stopping. Turn at the next sign without stopping. To go downhill without stopping. Plastic flowers without stopping. Light bulbs without stopping. Shoes without stopping. Getting onto the side road without stopping. Funeral services without stopping. MRI scans without stopping. Life jackets without stopping. Wheels without stopping. Plastic toys without stopping. Ink imprints without stopping. Without stopping. Και ύστερα είπες, θα τρέξω, θα τα αφήσω όλα και θα τρέξω. Διαδρομή 2, path 2. Θέλει να περπατήσει, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Να στρίψει στην επόμενη ταμπέλα, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Να κατηφορήσει το δρόμο, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Πλαστικά λουλούδια, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Λαμπιόνια, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Παπούτσια, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Να μπει στον παράδρομο, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Γραφεία κηδιών, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Μαγνητικές τομογραφίες, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Σωσίβια, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Ρόδες, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Κλασικά παιχνίδια, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Αποτυπώματα από μελάνι, χωρίς να σταματήσει. Χωρίς να σταματήσει.
Thank you, Joanna, for helping me with it. So this was part of another project that I'm doing with female poets, and we try to write and reflect on the shape of spiral. So that's why you saw a lot of spirals coming, going around. We may have the chance later to talk about this. So now I'm going to read a couple of poems. Sarah, help me with the time. I hope we're okay. Yeah.
Yes, we're good.
Great. Path 8. And when she can't breathe from the rhythm in people's steps, sucking in their little moments, she escapes in the repetitive sound of the waves that reminds of the big moments now forgotten. She stretches her fingers, flicking the dust away from anything that goes unnoticed. Path 18. Barbed fences growing inside her, rising up from her belly to her breasts, splitting at the sternum, moving towards her arms, climbing up to the head, motionless head, unable to look around, fingers that have turned to stone, from metal rings, and then, maybe in some rare moments, if she's cursed and lucky at the same time, she might be able to see a drop of blood. And I'm going to read one more probably from here. Path 27. This has a little subtitle, Fire. A burning sun fell and set the sea on fire. Shadows of eyes, hands, mouths, soundless screams. She goes up to the mountain, drawing the fire in, barefoot, among thistles, shrubs, and thyme bushes. And the sun sets the sea on fire. Shadows of soundless screams, getting louder with her breath. A warmth rising through her body, hot air swirling around her. She stands there, empty, staring at the orange ashes. She lets the hot air swirling from her smoked lungs. Soundless scream, shadows of eyes, hands, mouths, and the blue of the sea will never be the same again. So this was a part of, this was connected to the image that I have when I go, you know, in some lovely places and see the sea and the sunset. And I had this feeling at some point that this will never be, as I mentioned here, will never be the same, because the sea is a place of course of liberation, of freedom, but at the same time of death. So it has this kind of carry this kind of heaviness, this kind of is charged of all these lives. So this was part of I was trying to capture something from my experience with that. Do I have, how long do I have? Do I have for one more?
Yeah, you've just got just under 2 minutes left.
Great, because I just wanted to read one which is not part of the collection. I just want to read a new one that I developed through by attending David's wonderful workshops through the quarantine, and somehow it reflects a little bit how I felt, the process throughout the quarantine. It's a quite strange shape, so I may show this to you just to give you an idea. And I'll try to read it, and hopefully, you know, you will get the idea. Germana, deep in the darkness, o Erebus, is dwelling, κατοικεί, οίκος, home, born of chaos και γαία, chaos and Gaia. Love gives life to silence and darkness. Erebus. In front of your screen, you press Control plus Alt, trying to escape. Erebus. Still there, spreading silence. His sister Nix, Nichta, night, caressing his hair, your hair. Silence, only your heartbeat, no other sounds. Command plus F3, trying to escape. Fuck. Erebus plus Nix. Germana, in the dead of the night, χρόνος και ανάγκη έρχονται να σε βρουν. No escape. Χρόνος. Ether plus light. Μόνο σπαράγματα του ερεύους. Fragments of Erebus. No escape.
Invite to our Zoom stage, LQ. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for everybody who's organised this festival. It's an amazing event. I hope in future we'll be able to meet in person. That was amazing, Harry. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to hearing Rethabile and Maria read after me. I wanted to start with some poems that reflect some of my experience coming very much from a diaspora and being very aware of being a diaspora in my own generation, but also the diaspora generations that came before me. So as I said, I'm from a family of migrants, and my first poem is inspired by my great-grandmother. She came from southern China to Malaysia. There's a little bit of Teochew in the poem. I don't think you need it translated, but I wanted to say, because it might be helpful, that the last two characters at the end of the poem are actually visitors from the underworld, so a different sort of migration, a different border. Afterlife. Jalbolo, she'd had to go, steerage rat on the iron boat from Swatow. She'd refused again and again to bind her feet. Stubbornness landed her, an old husband, Nanyang, their dry goods store, years raising 2 sons, 1 not hers, 6 daughters, grandchildren, Woeng till the very last day. To hold her hand is to hold iron. Laumar's palms are restless. She forges a railroad from room to room. Stationed, she makes pomelos flower. The peeled segments are fragrant. Outside, orchids overflow pots. When Newtal and Bearming call, she escapes under the back door, along the yellow wall, scurrying grey and fast into the lalang. My next poem is very much about traveling, both in languages and in geography. And the Teochew that I use in this, I use a phrase which translates roughly as, I want to tell you something, there's something I want to talk to you about. Swallow. Grammars gather on power lines. Verbs twitter in the mangifera. I roost in humid shade overeating from the dictionary. Nouns sticky as langsat. A kilo of adjuncts, a catty of adverbs. 我爱隔了大这大位 Orotund, nobiety, opaque. Smeasling, destitute, spoilage. 我爱隔了大这大位 Minatory, plangent, deliquesce. Lutilant, sportive, crackle. The words I swallow become feathers poking through my skin. I am fledging for the migration. A window yawns, a line of lipstick, palms reddening the horizon. I came to the UK at the age of 10. Actually, I was sent to boarding school. And for those of you who don't know Malaysia, it's a country that has a racialized politics system. And my race is on my birth certificate. And I will never belong there because there's a definition of belonging to the country, Bumiputra, which I can never be because of my ethnicity. So my parents made this choice to send me as a child to another country. They still live there, as do much of my family. The poem uses Malaysian English, Standard English, Teochew, and a little bit of Scots. Learning to be mixy. 1. It was so panas, but aircon in airport bite like cat. Mother waved goodbye at gate, and I was buckled in and taken off to England, the boarding school, not like Enid Blyton, not at all, and Cambridge, the colleges, the backs and the hate, suppressing the suffix la, being proper and nice, cutting my tongue with that ice. 2. Akong love learning la, every day reading Sinchu Jitpo. Give his grandchildren all good name, Shekhui, Shetsu. Call my brother lazy worm for not reading book. But when we came home, we left the chill, Shakespeare at passport control. Filled our ears with warm tones. Jethoabwe. 3. When I took my Scots partner home, speaking proper English, he asked, Honey, do you ken you just switch tongues mid-sentence? Dialect, like a blush, licked my face. Champo champo. Speech bursting the ice wall. Jo puet way. This poem is one that I don't read very often because I actually find it quite challenging. I move between English and two Chinese dialects, both of which are very similar. It uses Hokkien and Teochew. It's called foreign language syndrome, which, if you haven't heard of it, is a condition that some people experience when they have a catastrophic brain injury. And sometimes that means they move between languages. So it felt a really good metaphor for this experience that I have in terms of my languages. When I move between Hokkien and Teochew, just to let you know what I'm doing is I'm counting. And then the next sentence is, what is your name? Foreign language syndrome. That bumper, brutal to the skull, knocked me back years. Speaking Hokkien in the playground, counting the rope turns. Che sa si no la. Di semimia. Healing, synapses pull home, sharing rambutans with brother. Che no sa si no la. Chiamong, limia mikai. English bleeds over the ground onto my tongue. And we've been talking about home and going home and how possible that is. The title of this poem is from Malay, and it's an expression that literally means to return to your home village, but most people use it to kind of say, you know, I'm going home. Balik kampung. When I return, I want it to be this. Father in a sarong and t-shirt, walking the 5-foot way, calling on shopkeepers in his mouthful of dialects, and the evening shopping done, reaching for my sticky hand and crossing to our Ford Escort. But when I look back over my shoulder, a child stands at the verge, staring at the rush hour traffic, with proton sagers and lorries in an unending rattling roar, and there's no one left to take her anxious hand. So thinking about places I'm from and being located, I wanted to read this poem that was kind of inspired by a place where I had a really happy childhood. My parents were, my parents were a zoologist and a botanist, and we spent a lot of time in the forest. And my father ran a field study station for quite a long time, and we spent quite a lot of time living there and interacting with the environment and the forest. And the title of the poem is the place. Gomba. Wet greeted us everywhere. Its green mossiness, earthy and insinuating between flip-flop and feet, woody drips from the dark canopy, squelching leaf litter. It licked us along the dark corridor, skidding from concrete kitchen onto long veranda and down the steep slope to that sudden, sunlit padang, and beyond flowing glints, clean water, swift. And there she was. Sungai, Kakak, capricious sister. She sprayed us with sweet stream scent, skirted soft sandstone, rocks slippery, shoulders undercutting earth banks. Her spirits altered after the rains. Waking us, she grumbled gravel, grumpy at being rushed, bearing the load of overlogging, heavy sediment from up valley deforestation. Our old white Ford was a rhino, turning reluctantly out of the gate. Its lurch lumber expelled me from forest home to other study stations, feeling tear blind, sick, evicted, I looked back to the red-roofed refuge of crashed-out lorrymen, its altar offering oranges and incense, the giant banyan with roots upward, branches hunched over, weeping. I'm currently working on a series of poems exploring what is native and non-native in terms of species, about what belongs here and what doesn't, and actually thinking about those things, about the animals and the plants we bring from one place to another for economic and other reasons. You know, that those journeys of migration that aren't chosen necessarily by the thing that has had to migrate. This poem's called Impatiens glandulifera. We've spread since we first set in 1839, introduced as ornamental jewelweed. There have been a great many enthusiasts. Miss Welch, who in 1948 collected ripe pods from Sheffield and took us to the Isle of Wight. Mrs. Norris of Camberley gave us, dripping pink to passers-by, our sticky seeds sedimenting shoes. Fat stands of us clog streams. We mass the banks of rivers, press damp together and splay in woods. Now when they see us lining green along roadsides, they let the council know. We disperse aggressively, they say. Seed heads exploding after noon showers puddle grass. Unabashed, we keep growing, mourning our moaned sisters, not allowed forgiveness. We proliferate too seductively for effective control, and anyway, the bees prefer us to the natives. Between our roots, we hold taut and trusting, as we first were, innocent seedlings from the soil. So I've been wanting to give voice to these plants that we now have and that we once loved, you know, talking about the places and the horticulturalists, but we don't think so fondly of them anymore. And so moving from Himalayan balsam to this poem, it's called Knotweed. You loved me, furled leaves, tiger stalks and fleece flowers, erect racemes on eager lips, summer blooming cream and green. I was triffid tender, and how bees loved us together, the bamboo honey and engorged lemony silence. I put a knot in your stomach. You say I'm a house cancer. I hate the way I can't hear my name without spades ringing. You cut and burn, and you bury what you burn. I know I'm leaving something out. Pesticides promise certainty. I don't want this to be real. I was hollow cord when Siebold transported me to Holland. My pain is in the asphalt. And I'm just going to finish with a tree poem. We don't think about trees as migrants, do we? Because they're so sort of stationary and rooted in place. But these are trees that people don't think belong anymore. This poem's called These Trees Were Considered Beautiful, 10,000 planted in Bermondsey. What have I learnt? Trees of heaven are allelopathic, extend out of neglected heaps, gratings, cement. They burgeon from both their seeds and cut roots. I take drop flowers home. Mother warns me, her good-for-nothing stump sprout. We're just like these trees. If too resilient, thriving just about everywhere, will be seen one day as too many, ghetto palms struggling to reach the sky. Anger, like a wind, threads through the gaps in tubular railing and across waste ground. May Cholchun spread out, suckering vigorously. May they continue to grow semen-scented, panicles erect above heart-scarred canopies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LQ. Could you all, by necessity, and it's also fabulous because it means that we can jump across many miles to speak to each other. And reading for us today from Paris, I'm delighted to welcome Rethabile Masilo.
Thank you, and thank you for the poets who have already read, and thank you for everyone who's here listening. Thank you to the organizers. I normally do not explain my poems. I might say one or two things about some of them, but I'll just go ahead and read. And I will begin with a poem called Kingdom of Weeds, which is in my third book of poems called Letter to Country. Kingdom of Weeds. The sea has a host of new angels. Not 10 miles off the Libyan coast where the boat sank, it carries men in its heart as time carries fate, and drops them with the living on rocks the shore has prepared for them. Last night there were voices there of lives being changed, those who made it becoming dead also, to hold their breath at the bottom and not ever be able to tell their story to fishermen who talk with waves at night. Never explain how in a dinghy a child is calmed by giving it urine to drink. They know gods and goddesses of the seabed now, who dwell beside Poseidon in his realm of weeds. So that was Kingdom of Weeds, written relatively recently with the migrations that had been happening off the coasts of several African countries toward Europe. The next poem is for my nephew who lost his life when he was 3 years old. And it's called The Boy Who Would Die. It's from my second book of poems called Waslap, W-A-S-L-A-P. Waslap means washcloth. I've often been asked, why do you call it washcloth? It's just that I once took my father's Waslap and came back to Paris with it and used it to wash myself with. So this poem is called The Boy Who Would Die. The bedroom was a shallow grave, perhaps the opinion of the men who came, or of the wardrobe in that room in which a woman hid. In any case, there was a burial in that room. Decked in bright pajamas, he slept, as bullets hankered for the softness of his body, and found the linoleum under the bed. Men he did not know, in a house on a hill, like a staircase. From the grave you climbed to the sitting room, whose cyclops window looked at the world. The reason, perhaps, for such an act, for which there was no wake. Then further up to the tin stove kitchen that stood above the rest, in which in winter we sang around a pot on the stove. If not for the outhouse some meters into the hill, the kitchen was the highest place of the house, the closest thing to heaven we had. No dog dared bark that night. We lived on that hill and it lived in us, in rocks carved out of boulders and chiseled into bricks by able hands of noble men. He died at the edge of his dream, a potted plant on a winter sill, aged 3. Died for us. And from then on, all poems would end thus. And the next poem I'm going to read is in a form called a ghazal, an Iranian form, and it's called My Father's Killers. My father's killers, they take to the road at midnight and turn toward land that by right we plow and turn. Their dark convoy passes whitewashed houses. A brake light, the buckies slow down and turn. They park at right angles to the street to light the yard. It's Daddy's day and turn. They have come on a crisp September night to blight us, make our season change and turn. The moon shimmers its flashlight on a blade. As from a height, the planets spin and turn. I forgot just before reading this poem to explain or to speak about a word. A bucky is a pickup van. A bucky is South African English for a pickup van. Because we're going to meet this word in another poem. In the next poem, as a matter of fact, called The Horses. Again, my attempt at describing what happened that night. Those people did come in buckies, 4 perhaps, out of the west. When one of the men came over and touched our manes with his hand, our mother rippled. We had been taught to never neigh. When one fine day, a neighbor beat us for eating his best beets and lettuces, even then we only bit our lips and let air ruffle our hair in his face while he struck. But these men here spoke a language we didn't know. Father stood on his hind legs and bared his teeth at them. And even at that dark hour, with the stars watching, Mother walked over to our youngest, swished flies off his face with her tail, then spun around to face those men again. No one neighed, not even when the shooting began. This poem came automatically as I was thinking about how many poems can I write about what happened to my family. And so the idea of turning the family into horses started forming in my head. Leaving home. The slow, soft rain beats on the head of my last days in Masilo. My mother and I sit across the table talking about another year. There is no animosity toward nature, as there was none against the sun of a few days before. We have forgiven. We said it. We said it out loud while looking at each other. We forgive. I think that sanity is light emanating from her eyes. When I gaze out the window, all I see is tomorrow, when this rain will be gone, and the sun, too, stars which spent last night falling, as if this day needed fireworks. No, tomorrow must come. It is day turned upside down to show what hides within. A handbag shaken onto a table and its contents studied. I found a long-lost Parker pen, dry at the nib. I've made a note to buy a bottle of ink. My mother found a lipstick she didn't even know she had ever had and put it on. Our hands searching among old and new objects in quietness. Somewhere out there, water took a badly placed object, maybe a drum, and rolled it down the street. a torrent was brewing. I knew I was searching for what could never be, when you want to be in two places at the same time. My hand moved over my mother's and found peace in that. This was written in 2014 after my trip home. How much time have I got?
Just under 5 minutes.
All right, I'll try to squeeze in as many as possible. Behind the stone wall, a poem that I wrote for my dad after he passed away. Behind a stone wall stands the rest of my father, carrying a book with pages we will never turn. We had buried him in a casket lined with newspapers to keep his face annoyed. Because freedom is immortal, we thought. He holds the book like a slab of concrete we should build the rest of our lives on, like someone saying, while lifting the marble off a tomb, here is what's to be dealt with. He looks like himself battling a plow into submission. At the sound of his voice, our dog whimpers, and I hear it scrape the bottom of a lower door at back, which father used when he came home late. When I awake, I will myself back to sleep. He hobbles to me and places the book in my small hands, then turns around and disappears without another look. And if I read one poem for my father, I'd like to read one for my mother as well. My mother's calendar. We have learned to abide by our mother's language and by her calendar when we are in her presence. Every time she mentions him, it's to relate a part of life to the years when he was with us. Old has become when your father was alive. And some of us have begun to speak her way too, the same way we began to love people after observing her. Now is since he died. And we even hear what she does not dare say, and left me behind. Our mother looks like her mother, and my sisters look like her. The boys in my family all look like each other and yearn to take after him. In the future, or soon, is fast becoming the day I am with your father and you are free at last. Even though she set us free at birth, just after she had handed each of us to the midwife for cleaning, and we had been returned to her arms for the first breakfast of our lives. And there is one more which is quite short, if I may. This poem is called Molters, as in molting, a snake, an insect that molts. All the while, this has worked against us in its choice of the simplest things. It has weighed against us its darkness, which rends the heart of the foreigner, but with which in numbers we must live. Close to millions for the dark-skinned like me, numbers of displaced heads which walk like shadows up and down streets. When night turns into a day of feasting, like a snake losing skin, we come into a light and live in it again. The smell of restaurants near the African Quarter. We drench ourselves with the music of our sound and with turmeric and roots that are rare here. until we have to pull back inside again. We always have to. There are limits to liberty unexplained by any legal document. But on the tube, you'll see us, ferrying the continent on our shoulders, carrying its colors and fearing no one in particular, though visibly concerned about papers a back pocket is supposed to contain. We are, at nighttime, spent but bright in the morning, just as the tube clatters underneath Paris and wakes us up. We are stopped and again frisked. Every street corner, another frontier. Thank you very much.
And last, but very not least, I'd like to invite to the Zoom stage, Maria Stadnicka. Hi, Maria.
Hello. I need a moment to take in what I've just heard. It has been, wow, so wonderful. It is hard to follow now. If I just take a few seconds.
And while you're doing that, again, just to remind everybody that after Maria's reading, we will be opening up the floor for the questions and answers. For our poets, please do check the chat box as well for the wonderful, well, feedback's a pretty bland word, but for the support and love that you're receiving for your readings. There's a lot of that coming through as well. But please, if anyone has got any questions, do pop them in the chat box, or after the final reading, we'll just perhaps take everyone off mute and see if a conversation naturally emerges, as it sometimes does. Are you ready, Maria?
I'm ready now.
Lovely, thank you. I'm just going to start my timer. Thank you.
Nietzsche insists that a person must find at least one truth before a good night's sleep. A terrible prospect, considering how facts come about with their own set of variables. Wind force, speed in meters per second, momentum at impact with the surface, temperature and friction between molecules. 90-degree angles do not exist in real life. Until now, we've been tricked by scientists into believing the verticals. Meanwhile, they build a simplified version of the world for funding purposes. My Facebook page runs updated commentaries on life. Outside a shop, police arrest a schoolgirl caught on camera stashing books under her blazer. Next frame, flyers with missing pets. My friends forward online when stuck in traffic on the way to work. Among thousands of people rushing in and out of soundproof rooms, one man leaves a window ajar. I almost hear the conversation he has with an ambulance crew called for a homeless found asleep in his greenhouse. Paramedic checks vital signs. Her ID badge gets tangled up in tubes from an oxygen cylinder. Scrolling down, I stumble over a story about a rabbit caught in headlights of trucks speeding on the motorway. Drivers comment, watching me jump in the picture to pick up the rabbit. Parking is forbidden on emergency lanes. I hurry back to my car, holding something real close to my chest. Ask about someone lost in an escape gone wrong. They will point at a place of returning where things talk themselves out of paper so loudly it is impossible to miss them, even if you can barely hear at all. Peculiar how Eternal now locks everything indoors. Before too long, hair grows in old toys, in furniture without memory. And recently we've spent so much time indoors, well I have, and I'm reflecting on my experience of living indoors and feeling isolated. And some of the poems that will follow will be part of my next collection, Buried Gods, Metal Prophets, coming out in February next year at Guillemot Press. Time lingers on scent of paint, tobacco and spring. Our kitchen wall sprouts from a conversation on books about people we know. I say I met Dr. Zhivago queuing at Nero's, heard him asking baristas about the tree's fate during mining season. You think they are cut short, then stop growing. I lock my paperbacks in a cupboard. They remind us of all the ink twisted in verse, seeded in layers of gravel. Our verbs reach the pit of a quarry and seal over. Snow forests shoot up in tears. We trip over extension cables in our flat. Beware the winter traffic on a drive from the airport. Hours get smaller just to fit in my suitcase as I speed past old school grounds. Ruined classrooms, geometry books, letters, pins, blazers, white socks mother is mending at night when her silver needle stitches a lie. There will be cakes and trips to the sea. Thread twists in a hand-sewn background where children abandon their beach ball. Move away from water, you cannot swim. Lifeguards respond to emergency calls. Tiny bodies hold hands round up a shore in a prayer for painless, skin-shedding times. Long-term life plans stop including her. Lost toys, leave home, wave to mothers at the departure lounge. Luggage waits on conveyor belts, gates slide, curtains shut slowly, like at the mortuary. Adulthood starts anytime, once you list common sense choices. Spend birthdays in mourning for demolished castles. Time set aside at the best friend's grave. Say goodbye and grow up. Be a good girl. Winter traffic echoes in an urban car park. Dust borealis shines on my steering wheel. The seventh virtue. Before winter crossing, I buy appropriate clothing, change dress with something suitable for long distance marches. I have just enough time to unpack my vanity case. Travel light, it says on a wall in my antechamber. I bite into body of Christ as if testing gold in old coins. Mother always insisted, try everything at least once. For unpredictable situations, I keep an inventory of things I am scared about. Places I travel to meet strangers, color, stepping off electric staircases a moment too early, full stop's claw which follows everything we forget to be for each other. Afraid of today's insignificance, of houses where nobody lives. My fingers turn blue, fear befriending monsters and frost, past tense in statements about future. Urban afterlife. After a funeral, paperwork sits in boxes at the end of desk rows. Undertakers pause to change suits before shift handover. Diesel engines flatten down places of rest. Glass, iron, gravel. Machines know cities grow in negative spaces, Oil traces gift buildings with signs of the cross. Gliding hawks operate traffic for clear passage. Night drops its guard. Machines argue. Power cuts add imagination to people's lives. So much for ending day's work seeking dawn. Father who art in heaven, I bought a derelict church and converted the building into a chicken farm. Every 8 weeks, the hatchery truck delivers me birds to feed, grow, slaughter. I'm led into temptation and spend nights smothered in feather-filled dreams. I trespass, forget the heating in the barn and beaks clatter the ventilation valves. Deliver me now from evil. Amen. Father, dreamed I lost an earlobe and my child's cry sounded mono in a faraway room. Someone has built a wall of flesh between us. You can hear much clearer once the waters calm down. Surely nurses know which lie sounds better at regular checkups. Now there is a baby tooth buried in each apple. One bite and seeds fall on my breast, swell like a season. My skin breaks out in green patches. Shoots sprout from my arms, seep out the milk, holding my bones together with my flesh. Buds and twigs push my ribs further apart. A child tree grows in my chest. It claims its sliver of meat, humming litanies to an old fruit. Father, I keep dreaming I'm queuing for bread. The sky has a bruise on its left cheek. People say they don't believe everything they heard in the news. Then a fire alarm goes off. We all rush to check out. Father, we eat pasta with mud and no one complains that earth lacks seasoning. Yes, please. I take another portion of this. Sleepwalk into the garden and back. Repeat instructions from qualified staff. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. Amen. Now a poem written about the period of lockdown. The mechanics of pencils. 6:30. My day grows smalled on corridors leading to shower blocks. On foot in my room, I measure space in back and forth steps. Movements along tiled floors square the symmetry between guards and me. 7:40, bread time, then 1 hour of exercise. Repetitive pacing during change of guards. Their bones click in position, the same place as yesterday. 11, daytime, interrogation. Ahead of compliance practice, I write down my faults with the mechanical rigor of a loaded handgun. Exercise break. Confined to my spot, I touch shades imprisoned between bricks crushed to the size of my thoughts. Second round of interrogations before 5 p.m. dinner. Hours with knife-edge creases trample over my neck, carve my name in words without vowels. Night cleans my fingers and eyes of things felt and seen during the day. Next to my bed, soldiers on duty check their watches. They too run on the spot, bound to movements. And I'll follow with 2 last poems. Domestication. Thank you for calling our service. You are 5th in the queue. An operator will be with you shortly. In the meantime, watch the beasts in our zoo through the keyhole. Please observe safety precautions and remain in your vehicle. A lion born in captivity has recently been reported missing. Thank you for calling our service. You are fourth in the queue. Apologies for the delay. All our operators are busy at present. We are experiencing unexpected disruption. Someone will be with you shortly. For information in your own language, access online tutorials. Thank you for calling our service. You are third in the queue. The operators here shouting, screaming outside the call center. High alert. Please remain in your vehicle and lock the doors. Our client's welfare is very important, except in emergency situations when staff come first. To survive the jungle, one must become animal. Thank you for calling our service. You are second in the queue. All our operators are dealing with a serious incident. We are sorry for this inconvenience. The background music contains sounds which you might find distressing. Press 0 to return to the main menu. Press 1 to continue listening. Thank you for calling our service. You are next. Please hand your bank details ready. Bear with us. Someone will be with you as soon as possible. To listen to these options again, press star. To keep on, please hold. You are next. You are. Good morning. Sorry to keep you waiting. You are through to the Samaritans. How can we help you today? And finally, unearthing. Wash your hands, they say, after a day in the fields. A daughter with soiled dress must clean her shame. My preparation foretells starched days in rooms where everyone wears masks. Impossible to tell who teachers are. Forthcoming lessons surrendered to hunger at the back of a classroom, bound to kinship. Black flats passed down to barefoot offspring. Poverty chooses its bloodline. With the same care, storks roost in the tallest houses. Safe nests. Look for weeds in mid-meadows. But when I bring home seeds under my fingernails, they run the taps, cold my hands raw. Blisters grow over my lifeline. The elders bow to their fear. Is in Latin. Timere is being afraid of unearthing aging blades. School days on hands and knees. My son and daughter, born in mid-meadows, raise their palms high at the back. Clean wounds face forward to honor their birthright.